6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. All right, forgot to fix my camera. Sorry about that. Everybody hear me? Everybody good? Having a good Thursday? Go to the right screen, Tiffany. Okay. We're here, we're live. How's it going? Everyone have a good week? I hope. Ready for some more of Eleanor and her shenanigans and bipolarisms? And no, I was not late, Dom. Thank you very much. It's not my fault your phone didn't load. I was right on the money, baby. So I took a little peek ahead. I didn't read ahead, but I'm thinking we probably have this stream and the next stream, and then we'll be finished. So hopefully the next two streams and the rest of the book give us something interesting to talk about. I'm not going to not finish the book, so it's definitely not my favorite, which Sam is gleefully laughing at, I'm sure, because he wanted Frankenstein. So I think that means that, do we have Dom to blame for that? I swear he voted for this one over Frankenstein to like help Devil out or something. Sorry, my finger just caught on something. Yeah, it wasn't a minute late, Dom. It's your phone's fault or computer or whatever the notification is. Nice try. I see you. I see you all in chat. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I don't really advertise my birthday. I like to spoil people on theirs. So, I don't know. Birthdays are birthdays. It's just another year. Day thing. But I appreciate everyone nevertheless. I'm gonna say hello to my favorite people, which is all of you. So, hey, everybody. lurkers or otherwise. Hello, the goddess. Thanks for always being here. You're the best. How many streams do you have up at once? Like, I feel like you mod for many streams all at the same time because we all like to go live around the same time. Hey, Dom. Oh my God, I've never heard that in my life before. Thank you so much. And thank you for the little mini recap I saw you put in chat. It'll end eventually, right? Right, Mudcrab? Hello. How's it going? Hands up, who's openly hoping that each and every character in this book dies horribly and by each and every minute. That annoying kid in the coffee shop and their family. Yep, everyone. What about the little girl that wanted the stars in her cup? If that's an actual character and not Eleanor when she was a little girl. Yeah, the housekeeper is oddly cool, isn't she? I nix the house guests at 11. The body's going to cellar. That would be a great line that she just randomly all of a sudden says and freaks them all out. It'd be great. Phone's on the... You guys are having fun in chat, aren't you? Let's see. Mud Crab. So jokes aside, what are we thinking of this novel? If it wasn't for Cal, I would have bailed completely. Yeah, if you make it to page 50, you're allowed to bail. That sounds like a personal thing. I've never heard that. I don't know if I could really do that. I guess I can't say that I haven't finished a book before. I don't recall not having finished a book. Did you change your profile picture? I feel like you did. Nikki. First. Nice. I like it. Whether you change it or otherwise. Page 49, you didn't give the book a chance, but hit 50 and life is too short to read books you're not enjoying. Well, I also enjoy the, oh God, this word, discourse. Who am I missing? Your average Patreon nerd. Hail, hello. How's it going? No chat. Sorry I missed the last few weeks. Hey, it's okay. I know you're busy. Oh, nice. You're on vacation. How long do you take vacay? Oh, so you're all caught up. Nice. I might be right about what, though? It might be all in the 67 Mustangs and I know nothing of the story. It's true. I swear to God. This character is... She's something. House has a history with the family. The staff refused to work after dark. The gals hear things I can't explain. You're right. I saw this. It could be the staff messing with them too. I don't know. They do seem pretty old. Maybe the staff technically aren't there either. Well, no. They're making food, so there's corporeal form in that somewhere. Thank you, Dom. And the goddess for the cake. Virtual cake. It was not late. But you can say Red Sox because the Yankees are gay. That's fine. Hey, Kel. I'm late, so how? Yeah, get on it. What the hell? Thanks, Kel. Glad you're here. No worries for being late. Excuse me? Is it not just work alone being here? It's mentally draining, you know. I didn't peek at the story, just like the pages and the parts and everything. Sorry, I have hiccups. Were you on Sam's side? Are you sure? Are you going to make me have to go back to whenever the crap I did that poll? Yeah. I work from home, so I did not have to dodge them. Technically speaking, had I worked in office, it is the complete, well, not complete opposite. It's still southwest, but it's the opposite direction. Those Venezuelan gangs, oh Lord, I'm going to get community noted probably with YouTube, are northwest of me. So quite a few blocks, but still not far enough for my comfort. So how many? A lot. I own a lot. I have a slight obsession with mugs, hats, t-shirts, and plushies. Okay, I might just have like a merchandise obsession. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. What'd you jinx? Okay. Okay, very, very well. I'll allow it. Oh, I forget you're in a book club, Mud. Okay, very well. So it's your book club rule. On the road again. No, it's not going to be a hiccup stream. Drive safely, by the way. Your average Patriot nerd, as always, hopefully. I say that because I drive safely all the time. It's just I drive a little bit faster than everybody else. And I pay better attention than everybody else. Can gallery to full page before the next take? They're not that bad. They're not like friggin' Kindle bad. Read for study. Do I actually don't? All right. Does everybody remember what happened last time? Eleanor is potentially writing like messages to herself on the walls. And then she's really pissy at Theodora and now in her head wants to kill her. So could totally be a psychological thriller where the house is making her crazy. And that's why she's thinking like that. And it was just like the switch flipped just instantaneously. But now Theodora's room is ruined. So they're staying in the same room because it was covered in blood or paint. We don't actually know. And like her clothes are all ruined. So now Theodora's wearing Eleanor's clothes. Yeah, Eleanor's going a little cuckoo. From that, at least. And then, yeah. So like it first happened when Luke went to go get some more coffee or tried to get more coffee from Mrs. Dudley, whatever her name is. Came back, saw the Eleanor come home message or help Eleanor come home. And then the next message was help Eleanor come home, Eleanor. Or something like that. Okay, now I have to look it up because I don't like being wrong. Or I try not to be wrong. But like after each one, like the first one, Theodora tried to help Eleanor come home, Eleanor. Yeah, I was right. Yay. Theodora tried to like tease her, but it didn't really seem like teasing after the second event. And that's kind of what set Eleanor off. And then, yeah, it's just been kind of a regular shit show since. If you can hear a cat meowing in the background, he seems to think that he should get food an hour and 45 minutes before he should. That doesn't make him a bastard, Sam, if you're lurking or watching later. Just makes him a brat. So yeah, that is basically what happened. It's all the high points. Oh, actually, I lied a little. Squishy. Eleanor had like a weird dream where she thought that Theodora was calling for her. I think it was Theodora. Someone was calling for her. Or no. It was just a random girl in Theodora's room that was calling for her, and they were holding hands, her and Theodora, because they're in the same room now. It was really creepy. Little girl, sounded like she was crying. Maybe she had been abused at some point along the way. And then she jerks out of the dream, realizes that she was not holding Theodora's hand, that she was sleeping. And so she was kind of creeped out whose hand she was holding. And that's kind of where that's at. So, yeah. Everybody ready? Part 6. How'd that recap go? Miss anything? To hold hands or not hold hands? Eleanor was in an accident before she left and is actually unconscious. Be interesting. I mean, if it does turn out to be like that, it'd be par for the course with Wizard of Oz, because I don't really like that story either. Although I didn't read it. It was a book, right? Wizard of Oz? Yeah, it was a book. Pretty sure. I didn't like the movie. But anyway, y'all can jaw about that while I continue reading to you in my not so scary voice. Let's get part 6 started. Part 6, Chapter 1. I am learning the pathways of the heart, Eleanor thought quite seriously, and then wondered what she could have meant by thinking any such thing. It was afternoon, and she sat in the sunlight on the steps of the summer house beside Luke. These are the silent pathways of the heart, she thought. She knew that she was pale and still shaken, with dark circles under her eyes, but the sun was warm and the leaves moved gently overhead, and Luke beside her lay lazily against the step. Luke, she asked, going slowly for fear of ridicule, why do people want to talk to each other? I mean, what are the things people always want to find out about other people? What do you want to know about me, for instance? He laughed. She thought, but why not ask what he wants to know about me? He is so extremely vain, and laughed in turn and said, what can I ever know about you beyond what I see? See was the least of the words she might have chosen, but the safest. Tell me something that only I will ever know. She was perhaps what she wanted to ask him, or what will you give me to remember you by? Or even, nothing of the least importance has ever belonged to me. Can you help? Then she wondered if she had been foolish or bold, amazed at her own thoughts, but he only stared down at the leaf he held in his hands and frowned a little, as one who devotes himself completely to an absorbing problem. He's trying to phrase everything to make as good an impression as possible, she thought, and I will know how he holds me by what he answers. How is he anxious to appear to me? Does he think that I will be content with small mysticism, or will he exert himself to seem unique? Is he going to be gallant? That would be humiliating, because then he would show that he knows that gallantry enchants me. Will he be mysterious? Mad? And how am I to receive this, which I perceive already will be a confidence, even if it is not true? Grant that Luke take me at my worth, she thought, or at least let me not see the difference. Let him be wise, or let me be blind. Don't let me, she hoped concretely, don't let me know too surely what he thinks of me. Then he looked at her briefly and smiled what she was coming to know as his self-deprecatory smile. Did Theodora, she wondered, and the thought was unwelcome, did Theodora know him as well as this? I never had a mother, he said, and the shock was enormous. Is that all he thinks of me? His estimate of what I want to hear of him? Will I enlarge this into a confidence making me worthy of great confidences? Shall I sigh, murmur, walk away? No one ever loved me because I belonged, he said. I suppose you can understand that? Sorry, page is sticking. No, she thought, you are not going to catch me so cheaply. I do not understand words and will not accept them in trade for my feelings. This man is a parrot. I will tell him that I can never understand such a thing, that maudlin self-pity does not move directly at my heart. I will not make a fool of myself by encouraging him to mock me. I understand, yes, she said. I thought you might, he said, and she wanted, quite honestly, to slap his face. I think you must be a very fine person, Nell, he said, and then spoiled it by adding, warm-hearted and honest. Afterwards, when you go home, his voice trailed off, and she thought, either he is beginning to tell me something extremely important, or he is killing time until this conversation can gracefully be ended. He would not speak in this fashion without a reason. He does not willingly give himself away. Does he think that a human gesture of affection might seduce me into hurling myself madly at him? Is he afraid that I cannot behave like a lady? What does he know about me, about how I think and feel? Does he feel sorry for me? Journeys end in lovers' meeting, she said. Yes, he said. I never had a mother, as I told you. Now I find that everyone else has had something that I missed. He smiled at her. I am entirely selfish, he said ruefully, and always hoping that someone will tell me to behave, someone will make herself responsible for me and make me be grown up. He is altogether selfish, she thought in some surprise. The only man I have ever sat and talked to alone, and I am impatient. He is simply not very interesting. Why don't you grow up by yourself, she asked him, and wondered how many people, how many women, had already asked him that. You're clever. And how many times had he answered that way? This conversation must be largely instinctive, she thought with amusement, and said gently, You must be a very lonely person. All I want is to be cherished, she thought, and here I am talking gibberish with a selfish man. You must be very lonely indeed. He touched her hand and smiled again. You were so lucky, he told her. You had a mother. God, she's judgmental. Again, I really hate short chapters. The man's trying to open up to her and she's just calling him selfish. Cool. Good job, Eleanor. You're a great character. One thing I want to go back because sometimes the way some of this stuff is worded is very weird. What do you want to know about me? For instance, why do people talk to each other? I mean, what are the things people always want to find out about people? What do you want to know about me, for instance? I guess you can take that as being selfish. The way it's written, it didn't really clarify who was talking there, like if she was still continuing. It was a different paragraph, so I assumed it was him, but whatever. But why not ask what he wants to know about me? He is so extreme. Okay, so her first thought after that is, but why not ask what he wants to know about me? He is so extremely vain. She contradicts herself within seconds. He asks, what do you want to know about me, for instance? She thinks he's vain and then instantly says, why don't you want to know something? Not says, thinks, why doesn't he want to know about me? And then calls him vain, in her own head. What can I ever know about you beyond what I see? Seems the least of the words she might have chosen, but the safest. Tell me something that only I will ever know was perhaps what she wanted to ask him. Well, then ask. Don't think it. God, if you're going to be so snooty, say what you think, Eleanor. You're so judgmental and freaking vain yourself. Ugh, she's driving me crazy, guys. Crazy. I mean, if y'all disagree with me, please feel free. I get judgmental, obviously. I have my own opinions. Perfectly fine discussing it with y'all. I already read that. Are you a cat, Legatus? Rank of Armored Wizard of Oz and many additional. Yeah, because I'm assuming he wrote Wicked as well. Was it called Wicked, or is that just the modernization? Or is that even part of his world? He's probably thinking that. He probably thinks she's crazy because she kind of seems crazy. Suit your feelings. I like this story better, you guys. Glad you're here to adjust it with me. Right? It should be a drinking game. Every stream, we're going to get a little bit tipsy at the very least. I mean, come on. Oh, he's so vain. I mean, sure, that could be a vain comment. Like, that's the first thing that he says. But she's talking about people and why they want to do things, what they talk about, things like that. You're only going to get to know each other by talking about yourselves. So it's general conversation. Sure, you didn't ask him, and that was the first thing that he leapt to. But the first thought that you have after that is, why doesn't he want to know about me? Why would he? You're asking weird fucking questions. Oh, sorry, I skipped your comment. I think I read it and I thought that I read it out loud. Sometimes I do that. No, I honestly don't think that she's going to kill Theodora. I don't even know if anyone's going to die, to be completely honest. This one seems, maybe we have time. See, that's what I'm saying. Freaking women, man. Am I right? As random as she is. But I don't know if I want to compare her to Anakin. Although he is... Sorry. He is... I rewatched those movies recently just because Disney Star Wars sucks. And I didn't like them, the prequels. So I was just like, you know, now that I've watched the slop that they're trying to feed us, maybe I'll go back and see if anything has changed. It just refreshed my memory on them. I'm never good at the name. So episode 1 essentially is decent. What's his name? Willow. Warwick. Michael. What's Willow's name? The actor, Warwick Davis. He's my Google. Man. He's in that movie. He doesn't have any lines. He's just literally there to be like a token weird character as a little person. It was funny. I was like, oh my God, this worked. Thank you, Mudcrab. Yeah, but so in rewatching them, wholly toxic is their relationship. Anakin is obsessed. Like ridiculously obsessed. It was kind of crazy. I can't they're still not better than the original trilogy. No, so he was it's not Jabba the Hutt, right? Whatever Hutt is in control of the races. He's just like one of his little henchmen. Emphasis on little. I can say that because I'm little. Just not that little. Phantom Menace, is that the first one? Yeah. Clinton, hello. How's it going? Please note that I'm no longer discussing in between the chapter. I'd rather apparently talk about the prequels. It's not my fault I got distracted, I swear. Why are you surprised? The acting is horrendous in the second one. Ugh. Got better. What's his name? Hayden. Y'all are seeing in real time how my brain malfunctions and doesn't have a memory to speak of. Whatever. You know his name. You know, the guy. They're still better than Disney Star Wars. Story arc is there, but the execution wasn't good. My favorite lightsaber fight is still the Duel of Fates. Yeah. Christensen, thank you, Kel. Thank you. Good Lord, that was ridiculous. Just shoot me. Stick a fork in me. I'm done. Really? Interesting. Wait. Which one's the Phantom Menace? I swear to God, that's episode 1. God, I suck. Ugh. What is wrong with me? Okay. I know how to find it. Really easily. I just saw Andy Pickle. Hello! Hi! How's it going? Welcome, my friend. How are you? Episode 2. Yeah, episode 1 is the Phantom Menace. So, okay. I thought it was crazy for a second. So that's kind of nuts. So you didn't even watch the second and third one? It's interesting, bud. Not for me. I would definitely, had I remembered it, I'm assuming you're talking about Christensen, I would have been able to type that faster than obviously I thought of it. So. I see. I can understand that. I don't remember when I first watched it because I don't think I watched the prequels as a kid. I only watched the original. Or at least that I remember. And you guys remember, just saw in real time how that works. This is why I can't talk this stuff. There are shows that I adore. And I'll forget half of the stuff. Makes me sad. But then again, it doesn't make me that sad because I go and rewatch them. Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. That's always the one that I like. Attack of the Clones, I can pretty much, that's that second one. Like, it just makes sense. But Revenge of the Sith. And Duel of the Fates is the Phantom Menace, right? Between Qui-Gon and Maul. Oh, that's cool. I growing up, I lived right by a drive-in theater, but it wasn't operating. I bet you it would have operated now, but because of COVID. And then they tore it down. Made me sad. Mainly because it was like a staple in giving people directions. If anybody grew up in the country, you don't say like turn west or east or left or right here, or you left or right, sure. Drive past the drive-in theater or take a left at the drive-in theater. If you've gone past the drive-in theater, you've gone too far type of directions in the country. So I was really sad when they tore that down. She hated the blaster noises and complained for most of it. My complaint is Jar Jar. I will never like Jar Jar. God, he's annoying. Okay, cool. See, I remembered something. This, if any of you are frustrated with having to say any of this in chat, welcome to my brother's life. He gets frustrated with me a little bit. Tricked her into taking. All right, fine. I'll stop avoiding the next chapter. Let's continue with some Eleanor. Keep talking Star Wars if you so feel, though. Part 6, Chapter 2. I found it in the library, Luke said. I swear I found it in the library. Incredible, the doctor said. Look, Luke said. He set the great book on the table and turned to the title page. He made it himself. Look, the title's been lettered in ink. Memories for Sophia Ann Lester Crane. A legacy for her education and enlightenment during her lifetime from her affectionate and devoted father, Hugh Desmond Lester Crane. 21st June, 1881. They pressed around the table, Theodora and Eleanor and the doctor, while Luke lifted and turned the first page of the book. You see, Luke said, his little girl is to learn humility. He has clearly cut up a number of fine old books to make this scrapbook, because I seem to recognize several of the pictures, and they are all glued in. The vanity of human accomplishment, the doctor said sadly. Think of the books Hugh Crane hacked apart to make this. Now here is a Goya etching, a horrible thing for a little girl to meditate upon. Underneath he has written, Luke said, under this ugly picture, honor thy father and thy mother, daughter, authors of thy being, upon whom a huge charge has been laid, that they lead their child in innocence and righteousness along the fearful narrow path to everlasting bliss, and render her up at last to her God, a pious and virtuous soul. Reflect, daughter, upon the joy in heaven as the souls of these tiny creatures wing upward, released before they have learned aught of sin or faithlessness, and make it thine unceasing duty to remain as pure as these. Poor baby, Eleanor said, and gasped as Luke turned the page. Hugh Crane's second moral lesson derived from a color plate of a snake pit, and vividly painted snakes writhed and twisted along the page. Above the message, neatly printed and touched with gold. Eternal damnation is the lot of mankind. Neither tears nor reparation can undo man's heritage of sin. Daughter, hold apart from this world, that its lusts and ingratitudes corrupt thee not. Daughter, preserve thyself. Next comes hell, Luke said. Don't look if you're squeamish. I think I will skip hell, Eleanor said, but read it to me. Wise of you, the doctor said. An illustration from Fox, one of the less attractive deaths, I have always thought, although who can fathom the ways of martyrs? See this, though, Luke said. He's burnt away a corner of the page, and here is what he says. Daughter, could you but hear for a moment the agony, the screaming, the dreadful crying out and repentance of those poor souls condemned to everlasting flame? Could thine eyes be seared but for an instant with the red glare of wasteland burning always? Alas, wretched beings in undying pain. Daughter, your father has this minute touched the corner of his page to his candle, and seen the frail paper shrivel and curl in the flame. Consider, daughter, that the heat of this candle is to the everlasting fires of hell as a grain of sand to the reaching desert. And as this paper burns in its slight flame, so shall your soul burn forever, in fire 1,000-fold more keen. I'll bet he read it to her every night before she went to sleep, Theodora said. Wait, Luke said. You haven't seen heaven yet. Even you can look at this one now. It's Blake, and a bit stern, I think, but obviously better than hell. Listen. Holy, 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 in the pure light of heaven, the angels praise him, and one another unendingly. Daughter, it is here that I will seek thee. What a labor of love it is, the doctor said. Hours of time just planning it, and the lettering is so dainty, and the gilt. Now the 7 deadly sins, Luke said, and I think the old boy drew them himself. He really put his heart into gluttony, Theodora said. I'm not sure I'll ever be hungry again. Wait till lust, Luke told her. The old fellow outdid himself. I don't really want to look at any more of it, I think, Theodora said. I'll sit over here with Nell, and if you come across any particularly edifying moral precepts you think would do me good, read them aloud. Here is lust, Luke said. Was ever woman in this humor wooed? Good heavens, said the doctor. Good heavens. He must have drawn it himself, Luke said. For a child? The doctor was outraged. Her very own scrapbook, not Pride, the very image of our Nell here. What? Said Nell, starting up. Teasing, the doctor said placatingly. Don't come look, my dear, he's teasing you. Sloth now, Luke said. Envy, said the doctor. How the poor child dared transgress. The last page is the very nicest, I think. This, ladies, is Hugh Crane's blood. Nell, do you want to see Hugh Crane's blood? No, thank you. Theo? No? In any case, I insist, for the sake of your two consciences, in reading what Hugh Crane has to say in closing his book. Daughter, sacred pacts are signed in blood, and I have here taken from my own wrist the vital fluid with which I bind you. Live virtuously, be meek, have faith in thy Redeemer, and in me, thy Father, and I swear to thee that we will be joined together hereafter in unending bliss. Accept these precepts from thy devoted Father, who in humbleness of spirit has made this book. May it serve its purpose well, my feeble effort, and preserve my child from the pitfalls of this world, and bring her safe to her Father's arms in heaven. And signed, thy ever-loving Father, in this world and the next, author of thy being and guardian of thy virtue, in meekest love, Hugh Crane. Theodora shuddered. How he must have enjoyed it, she said, signing his name in his own blood. I can see him laughing his head off. Not healthy. Not at all a healthy work for a man, the doctor said. But she must have been very small when her father left the house, Eleanor said. I wonder if he ever read it to her. I'm sure he did, leaning over her cradle and spitting out the words so they could take root in her little mind. Hugh Crane, Theodora said, you were a dirty old man, and you made a dirty old house, and if you can still hear me from anywhere, I would like to tell you, to your face, that I genuinely hope you will spend eternity in that foul, horrible picture, and never stop burning for a minute. She made a wild, derisive gesture around the room, and for a minute, still remembering, they were all silent, as though waiting for an answer. And then the coals in the fire fell with a little crash, and the doctor looked at his watch, and Luke rose. The sun is over the yardarm, the doctor said happily. Well, Hugh Crane kind of sounds creepy, like the super religious type, so that's fun. By the way, I'm terrible at remembering to remind people. There is a Stream Elements link pinned at the top of the chat if anyone feels so generous. No requirements whatsoever, but appreciation nonetheless. That sounded practiced. Blech, it was gross. It was not practiced. It still sounded blech. I even hate that theory, Cal. Ultimate Sith Lord. Nope. I just dislike him. I cannot stand him. I have never seen that. Or I don't remember it if I did. Like, I would have been little. Yeah, the pod race is cool. Honestly, I don't remember much of it beyond that and Duel of the Fates, really. Prequels were made for a different audience. The OG series had long, amazingly beautiful setup shots, while Austin Williams explored certain trends. Prequels were bam, bam, bam. It's true. I don't know why I was reading that to myself. I guess I could have read that out loud. Sorry, Andy. Meme, Anakin, Queen Amidala is rich. She can come back a buy free mother free. Buy one, get one free? My mother, right? What? She can come back a buy free my mother, right? And buy free my mother, I think is what you mean, Legatus. Everyone else looks away, no answering. Also, the awkward bit when you realize that the Republic allowed slavery in the more backwater planets, but the Empire seemed to have stamped it out. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, I was the fact that there is a Luke in here and we're on Star Wars, I got this very mixed up in my head. But I mean, that was kind of your point. So good job, your average patriot nerd. Notice that when Vader says to Luke, Obi-Wan has taught you well, Luke was up on the scaffold and this had the high ground. Oh, yeah, that's true. Wrath of Khan is probably the best Star Trek movie. Are you trying to say that it's better than Into Darkness? Don't hurt me for saying that. I like those movies for what they are. The first two. Although I do find it funny that they whitewashed Khan. Just saying. Fox's Book of Murders. This seems to be the reference to the Hell Pages. It was a 1560s book. I had to look hard to find that out, so I guess the reference was better known in the 19th. Well, yeah, I'm sure it was. Refresh my memory, Sam. Welcome. Hi. Hope you're having a good day. This sounds more and more like some VC Andrews shit. So I know that name, don't know what it's from. VC Andrews. Is that going to be some psychological thriller type of thing? It's what I'm leaning towards. Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek movie. Hey, Blue-Eyed Scorpio. Ukraine was the dad's name in the show. Interesting. So is Eleanor in the library now after she... I don't believe so. I think they were in the parlor because Luke... So it started out saying that Luke found it in the library, which you can... what is the word I'm looking for? You can interpret that as he found it elsewhere and brought it to where they were at. That's my interpretation of it, at least. Because he says, I found it in the library. I swear I found it in the library. So you can infer. That's what I was looking for. Interpret, yes, but infer was the word I was actually looking for. That they are back in the parlor, which they were previously in the book. They mentioned that that would kind of be like their go-to place, that they would discuss things and whatnot. So I'm pretty sure that's where they're at. Your average patriot nerd, is that because I said the Into Darkness comment, I presume? Maybe. Andrews was the author who was big in the creepy incest young adult market, right? Okay. Got it, Sam. Yeah, because it was sounding very much like the uber religious, but somehow bending religion into daddy loves daughter a little bit too much type of person. That's how it was feeling towards the end for me. So I get what you're saying now. To be fair, Ricardo Montalva was Mexican playing a sick. Yeah. Montalva. But still, they whitewashed him. In a sense. Noted. Do not read Flowers in the Attic. I think you and I might have talked about that, or I talked about it with someone. I don't want to mention anything from the show really because I don't know what happens in the book, so I can reveal a spoiler. No. I understand. The book's almost done. We've got less than 100 pages left, so don't get catty in my chat. Andrew's novels combine gothic horror and family saga revolving around family secrets and forbidden love. Got it. Oh, it's a woman. Why are women so weird? Tale of 4 children smuggled into the attic of their wealthy, estranged by his grandmother and held prisoner there by their mother. It's so weird. Oh. Vague recollection. So what did you think of the chapter? It was very, very, very old school religion. It's coming off that way, at least. I'm going to be right back. I would like to get more tea, so bear with me for a moment. All right, I am back. Sorry about that. I think what I was planning on doing, if I remember correctly, was actually doing part 6 and 7 tonight, because there are 9 parts. So we'll do the next 2 parts in the next stream. Yeah, that's my plan. And I understand if not everybody wants to stay that long. So let me do some fancy stuff. Doesn't matter. I'll fix it in post. Forgot I was doing that. But anyway, what did I do with my bookmark? I love how we're basically talking about anything but this book. I mean, that chapter was basically nothing. Sum it up in creepy religious dad made a creepy religious book. Don't do bad things, daughter. You have to go to heaven. Yes, Victorian settings usually are creepy. Weird little chapter. I mean, if the father did make the book for his kid and did sign in blood, then, well, that is not normal. Yeah, it's very weird. But sort of comes... Are you guys hearing a weird noise? My camera likes to be a jerk. Give me a second. Well, if you were hearing the noise, I'm no longer hearing it, so hopefully it's fixed. Anyway, sorry. Okay, but sort of comes from nowhere in the story. Hey, found a book. Yeah, this writing style is so very weird to me. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite at all. Like talking about antebellum, the term antediluvian is used in Vampire the Masquerade, talking about history or vamps from before the flood. The Others was a really good haunted. Is that a show or a book? Blue Eyed Scorpio? I think I've heard of it, but... Close Encounters. I enjoyed that. That's... Chat jumped on me. I saw Weird Science is like... You are right, Dom. Nothing too exciting happened in these 2 chapters. However, you used the wrong 2, my friend. Add an extra O. I'm going to start being like Jessica and correcting you. I've been very nice to you, though, so. I want to understand the glory of the pain like Matthew, but cutting the flesh makes him have a husband's bulge, and I do not get like cabin in the woods. What the hell was that I just read, Sam? Okay, I want to understand the glory of the pain like Matthew, but cutting the flesh makes him have a husband's bulge, and I do not get like that. Okay, well, that was weird. Thank you so very much for that. All right. Let's go. Part 6, Chapter 3. Theodora curled by the fire, looking up wickedly at Eleanor. At the other end of the room, the chessmen moved softly, jarring with little sounds against the table. And Theodora spoke gently, tormentingly. Will you have him at your little apartment, Nell, and offer him to drink from your cup of stars? Eleanor looked into the fire, not answering. I have been so silly, she thought. I have been a fool. Is there a room enough for two? Would he come if you asked him? Nothing could be worse than this, Eleanor thought. I have been a fool. Perhaps he has been longing for a tiny home, something smaller, of course, than Hill House. Perhaps he will come home with you. A fool, a ludicrous fool. Your white curtains, your tiny stone lions. Eleanor looked down at her almost gently. But I had to come, she said, and stood up, turning blindly to get away. Not hearing the startled voices behind her, not seeing where or how she went, she blundered somehow to the great front door and out into the soft, warm night. I had to come, she said to the world outside. Fear and guilt are sisters. Theodora caught her on the lawn. Silent, angry, hurt, they left Hill House side by side, walking together, each sorry for the other. A person angry or laughing or terrified or jealous will go stubbornly on into extremes of behavior impossible at another time. Neither Eleanor nor Theodora reflected for a minute that it was imprudent for them to walk far from Hill House after dark. Each was so bent upon her own despair that escape into darkness was vital. And containing themselves in that tight, vulnerable, impossible cloak which is fury, they stamped along together, each achingly aware of the other, each determined to be the last to speak. Eleanor spoke first, finally. She had hurt her foot against a rock and tried to be too proud to notice it, but after a minute, her foot paining, she said in a voice tight with the attempt to sound level, I can't imagine why you think you have any right to interfere in my affairs. Her language, formal to prevent a flood of recrimination or undeserved reproach. Were they not strangers, cousins? I am sure that nothing I do is of any interest to you. That's right, Theodora said grimly. Nothing that you do is of any interest to me. We are walking on either side of a fence, Eleanor thought, but I have a right to live too, and I wasted an hour with Luke at the summer house trying to prove it. I hurt my foot, she said. I'm sorry, Theodora sounded genuinely grieved. You know what a beast he is, she hesitated. A rake, she said finally with a touch of amusement. I'm sure it's nothing to me what he is. And then, because they were women quarreling, as if you cared anyway. He shouldn't be allowed to get away with it, Theodora said. Get away with what? Eleanor asked daintily. You're making a fool of yourself, Theodora said. Suppose I'm not, though. You'd mind terribly if you turned out to be wrong this time, wouldn't you? Theodora's voice was wearied, cynical. If I'm wrong, she said, I will bless you with all my heart, fool that you are. You could hardly say anything else. They were moving along the path toward the brook. In the darkness, their feet felt that they were going downhill, and each privately and perversely accused the other of taking deliberately a path that had followed together once before in happiness. Anyway, Eleanor said in a reasonable tone, it doesn't mean anything to you, no matter what happens. Why should you care whether I make a fool of myself? Theodora was silent for a minute, walking in the darkness, and Eleanor was suddenly absurdly sure that Theodora had put out a hand to her unseen. Theo, Eleanor said awkwardly, I'm no good at talking to people and saying things. Theodora laughed. What are you good at? She demanded, running away. Nothing irrevocable had yet been spoken, but there was only the barest margin of safety left them, each of them moving delicately along the outskirts of an open question, and once spoken, such a question as, do you love me? Could never be answered or forgotten. They walked slowly, meditating, wondering, and the path sloped down from their feet, and they followed, walking side by side in the most extreme intimacy of expectation. Their fainting and hesitation done with, they could only await passively for resolution. Each knew, almost within a breath, what the other was thinking and wanting to say. Each of them almost wept for the other. They perceived at the same moment the change in the path, and each knew then the other's knowledge of it. Theodora took Eleanor's arm, and afraid to stop, they moved on slowly, close together, and ahead of them the path widened and blackened and curved. Eleanor caught her breath, and Theodora's hand tightened, warning her to be quiet. On either side of them, the trees, silent, relinquished the dark color that they held, pale, grew transparent, and stood white and ghastly against the black sky. The grass was colorless, the path wide and black. There was nothing else. Eleanor's teeth were chattering, and the nausea of fear almost doubled her. Her arm shivered under Theodora's holding hand, now almost a clutch, and she felt every slow step as a willed act, a precise, mad insistence upon the putting of one foot down after the other as the only sane choice. Her eyes hurt with tears against the screaming blackness of the path and the shuddering whiteness of the trees, and she thought, with a clear, intelligent picture of the words in her mind, burning. Now I am really afraid. They moved on, the path unrolling ahead of them, the white trees unchanging on either side, and above all, the black sky lying thick overhead. Their feet were shimmering white where they touched the path. Theodora's hand was pale and luminous. Ahead of them, the path curved out of sight, and they walked slowly on, moving their feet precisely because it was the only physical act possible to them, the only thing left to keep them from sinking into the awful blackness and whiteness and luminous evil glow. Now I am really afraid, Eleanor thought in words of fire. Remotely, she could still feel Theodora's hand on her arm, but Theodora was distant, locked away. It was bitterly cold, with no human warmth near. Now I am really afraid, Eleanor thought, and put her feet forward one after another, shivering as they touched the path, shivering with mindless cold. The path unwound. Perhaps it was taking them somewhere willfully, since neither of them could step off it and go knowingly into the annihilation of whiteness that was the grass on either side. The path curved, black and shining, and they followed. Theodora's hand tightened, and Eleanor caught her breath on a little sob. Had something moved ahead? Something whiter than the white trees beckoning? Beckoning, fading into the trees, watching. Was there movement beside them, imperceptible in the soundless night? Did some footstep go invisibly along with them in the white grass? Where were they? The path led them to its destined end and died beneath their feet. Eleanor and Theodora looked into a garden, their eyes blinded with the light of sun and rich color. Incredibly, there was a picnic party on the grass in the garden. They could hear the laughter of the children and the affectionate, amused voices of the mother and father. The grass was richly, thickly green. The flowers were colored red and orange and yellow. The sky was blue and gold, and one child wore a scarlet jumper and raised its voice again in laughter, tumbling after a puppy over the grass. There was a checked tablecloth spread out, and smiling, the mother leaned over to take up a plate of bright fruit. Then Theodora screamed. "Don't look back," she cried out in a voice high with fear. "Don't look back, don't look, run." Running without knowing why she ran, Eleanor thought that she could catch her foot in the checked tablecloth. She was afraid she might stumble over the puppy, but as they ran across the garden, there was nothing except weeds growing blackly in the darkness, and Theodora, screaming still, trampled over the bushes where there had been flowers and stumbled, sobbing, over half-buried stones and what might have been a broken cup. Then they were beating and scratching wildly at the white stone wall where vines grew blackly, screaming still and begging to be let out, until a rusted iron gate gave way and they ran, crying and gasping and somehow holding hands across the kitchen garden of Hill House, and crashed through a back door into the kitchen to see Luke and the doctor hurrying to them. "What happened?" Luke said, catching at Theodora. "Are you all right?" "We've been nearly crazy," the doctor said, worn. "We've been out looking for you for hours." "It was a picnic," Eleanor said. She had fallen into a kitchen chair and she looked down at her hands, scratched and bleeding and shaking without her knowledge. "We tried to get out," she told them, holding her hands out for them to see. "It was a picnic. The children." Theodora laughed in a little continuing cry, laughing on thinly, and said through her laughter, "I looked back. I went and looked behind us," and laughed on. "The children and a puppy. Eleanor." Theodora turned wildly and put her head against Eleanor. "Eleanor," she said, "Eleanor." And holding Theodora, Eleanor looked up at Luke and the doctor and felt the room rock madly, and time, as she had always known time, stop. Okay, now I'm a little curious. I'm going to turn a light on because I kind of forgot to do that earlier. That's why it got so dark in here. Un momento, por favor. That was interesting. I'm actually wanting to know what the hell happened, but knowing how this book is written, it's probably just going to be something different, like the next day, and we're not going to get an explanation as to what Theodora saw versus what Eleanor saw. Thoughts, comments, concerns? Occurring or belonging to the era before the flood. I had to look it up. Not that clever. Creepy line from the diary of a family of cannibalistic rednecks who became zombies. Which one are you talking about? I am so confused. You chat. Just a little quote about psychotic religious people. Was that the Cabin in the Woods? Whatever. Yes, rake is an old term because I have a guilty pleasure in books that I read on my own time. I definitely know that term. That is interesting that the female version is called by another yard implement. That is true. She a hoe. Wilhelmina Preston and Theodora Logan. Wild stallions. Don't know what you're talking about. This is a smart plan. Let's walk together in the dark in a strange wood. That usually ends well. I was thinking that the entire time. Your average Patriot nerd definitely was. Yes, Sam. This book has done it once before. Where it was just kind of out of the blue. Oh, yeah, I wrote a horror book, and it's touted as a horror book. I guess I should put some horror in it. And then it just gets completely deflated in the next chapter. Technically, so like Eleanor, she left on her own, and then Theodora caught up with her. So technically, they were together. Probably should be a duo of one male to one female, but, you know, they're females, and they were fighting for whatever reason. Also, what the hell was that? Beginning of the chapter, just all of a sudden, they're fighting with each other. Like, Theodora sounds jealous. Where the hell did it come into any part of the novel that Luke is a rake player, whatever? It's very weird. Bit abrasive there, but whatever. Yeah. Ooh, sorry. And then you see him, Shia LaBeouf. You see blood on him. Oh my God, there's blood everywhere. Shia LaBeouf sprints towards you on all fours. Shia LaBeouf. Thank you. Thank you for that, Andy. E and C are being passive-aggressive bitches to each other again, or T is being nice and E is being paranoid. Then they both go outside, then imagine something and go in again. Yeah, technically that is a good summary of this chapter. Yeah. Yes, Sam, that is this book. Oh, you want interesting? Okay, I'll give you interesting for a minute. Ha! Thanks. I can't do a mwahaha laugh without it sounding ridiculous like it just did, so I gave it anyway, apparently. What's wrong with me? Yeah, that was a crazy chapter. Came out of nowhere. Like I said, we probably won't get a follow-up right away. If at all, with this book. I swear to God. It's ridiculous. This is the thing. They are post-dinner. That's when the chess playing happens. Yep. Night. Yep. I mean, it seemed like it was more dusk in the beginning, and then it got dark, like, real quick, which tends to happen. Yes, Sam. Yes. And the fact that this is apparently a popular book, it's not. That's the thing. With the way that this book is written, you're not getting full stories of these people. Like, there's really no character development because you're not, like, something interesting will take place and then the chapter ends and then it's 7 hours later. Like, you don't get any character work whatsoever in that time frame. And a lot of this is bipolar crap. I don't do well with bipolar shit. It's ridiculous to me. Yeah. Which is funny because I'm a woman and we all tend to be bipolar. So, that was interesting. Was that the end of... Yeah. So that was the end of part 6. So we're going to be moving on to part 7. So I'm going to start over with the chapters again. Yeah, that was only, what, 3 chapters? Get my voice back, really. Yeah, this love triangle thing. It's just... We're getting too much of Eleanor. And I know that this is basically written from her head. But I'd still like to understand where her thought processes are leading to, coming from something. Like, give me a little bit more, maybe next time. I've read better books doing similar things in my time, so let's start part 7. Part 7, Chapter 1. On the afternoon of the day that Mrs. Montague was expected, Eleanor went alone into the hills above Hill House, not really intending to arrive at any place in particular, not even caring where or how she went, wanting only to be secret and out from under the heavy dark wood of the house. I thought like a page stuck together or something. They really just jumped right into something else. All right, cool. Continuing on. She found a small spot where the grass was soft and dry and lay down, wondering how many years it had been since she had laid on soft grass to be alone to think. Around her, the trees and wildflowers, with that oddly courteous air of natural things suddenly interrupted in their pressing occupations of growing and dying, turned toward her with attention, as though dull and imperceptive as she was, it was still necessary for them to be gentle to a creation so unfortunate as not to be rooted in the ground, forced to go from one place to another, heartbreakingly mobile. Idly, Eleanor picked a wild daisy, which died in her fingers, and lying on the grass, looked up into its dead face. There was nothing in her mind beyond an overwhelming wild happiness. She pulled at the daisy and wondered, smiling at herself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's the end of the chapter. I'm going on to chapter 2 because nothing to discuss here. Part 7, Chapter 2. Put the bags down in the hall, Arthur, Mrs. Montague said. Wouldn't you think there'd be someone here to help us with this door? They'll have to get someone to take the bags upstairs. John? John? My dear, Dr. Montague hurried into the hallway, carrying his napkin, and kissed his wife obediently on the cheek she held out for him. How nice that you got here. We'd given you up. I said I'd be here today, didn't I? Did you ever know me not to come when I said I would? I brought Arthur. Arthur, the doctor said without enthusiasm. Well, somebody had to drive, Mrs. Montague said. I imagine you expected that I would drive myself all the way out here? Because you know perfectly well that I get tired. How do you do? The doctor turned, smiling on Eleanor and Theodora with Luke behind them, clustered uncertainly in the doorway. My dear, he said, these are my friends who have been staying in Hill House with me these past few days. Theodora, Eleanor Vance, Luke Sanderson. Theodora and Eleanor and Luke murmured civilly, and Mrs. Montague nodded and said, I see you didn't bother to wait dinner for us. We'd given you up, the doctor said. I believe that I told you I would be here today. Of course, it is perfectly possible that I am mistaken, but it is my recollection that I said I would be here today. I'm sure I will get to know all your names very soon. This gentleman is Arthur Parker. He drove me here because I dislike driving myself. Arthur, these are John's friends. Can anybody do something about our suitcases? The doctor and Luke approached, murmuring, and Mrs. Montague went on. I am to be in your most haunted room, of course. Arthur can go anywhere. That blue suitcase is mine, young man, and the small attaché case, they will go in your most haunted room. The nursery, I think, Dr. Montague said when Luke looked at him inquiringly. I believe the nursery is one source of disturbance, he told his wife, and she sighed irritably. It does seem to me that you could be more methodical, she said. You've been here nearly a week, and I suppose you've done nothing with the planchette? Automatic writing? I don't imagine either of these young women has mediumistic gifts. Those are Arthur's bags right there. He brought his golf clubs just in case. Just in case of what? Theodora asked blankly, and Mrs. Montague turned to regard her coldly. Please don't let me interrupt your dinner, she said finally. There's a definite cold spot just outside the nursery door, the doctor told his wife hopefully. Yes, dear, very nice. Isn't that young man going to take Arthur's bags upstairs? You do seem to be in a good deal of confusion here, don't you? After nearly a week, I certainly thought you'd have things in some kind of order. Any figures materialize? There have been decided manifestations. Well, I'm here now, and we'll get things going right. Where is Arthur to put the car? There's an empty stable in the back of the house where we have put our other cars. He can take it around in the morning. Nonsense. I do not believe in putting things off, John, as you know perfectly well. Arthur will have plenty to do in the morning without adding to night's work. He must move the car at once. It's dark outside, the doctor said hesitantly. John, you astound me. Is it your belief that I do not know whether it is dark outside at night? The car has lights, John, and that young man can go with Arthur to show him the way. Thank you, said Luke grimly, but we have a positive policy against going outside after dark. Arthur may, of course, if he cares to, but I will not. The young ladies, the doctor said, had a shocking... Young man's a coward, Arthur said. He had concluded his fetching of suitcases and golf bags and hampers from the car, and now stood beside Mrs. Montague, looking down on Luke. Arthur's face was red, and his hair was white, and now scorning Luke, he bristled. Ought to be ashamed of yourself, fellow, in front of the women. The women are just as much afraid as I am, Luke said primly. Indeed, indeed. Dr. Montague put his hand on Arthur's arm soothingly. After you've been here for a while, Arthur, you'll understand that Luke's attitude is sensible, not cowardly. We make a point of staying together after dark. I must say, John, I never expected to find you all so nervous, Mrs. Montague said. I deplore fear in these matters. She tapped her foot irritably. You know perfectly well, John, that those who have passed beyond expect to see us happy and smiling. They want to know that we are thinking of them lovingly. The spirits dwelling in this house may be actually suffering because they are aware that you are afraid of them. We can talk about it later, the doctor said wearily. Now, how about dinner? Of course. Mrs. Montague glanced at Theodora and Eleanor. What a pity that we had to interrupt you, she said. Have you had dinner? Naturally, we have not had dinner, John. I said we would be here for dinner, didn't I? Or am I mistaken again? Nag. At any rate, I told Mrs. Dudley that you would be here, the doctor said, opening the door which led to the game room and on into the dining room. She left us a splendid feast. Poor Dr. Montague, Eleanor thought, standing aside to let the doctor take his wife into the dining room. He is so uncomfortable. I wonder how long she is going to stay. I wonder how long she is going to stay, Theodora whispered in her ear. Maybe her suitcase is filled with ectoplasm, Eleanor said hopefully. And how long will you be able to stay? Dr. Montague asked, sitting at the head of the dinner table with his wife cozily beside him. Well, dear, Mrs. Montague said, tasting daintily of Mrs. Dudley's caper sauce, you have found a fair cook, have you not? You know that Arthur has to get back to his school. Arthur is a headmaster, she explained down the table, and he has generously canceled his appointments for Monday, so he had better leave Monday afternoon, and then Arthur can be there for classes on Tuesday. A lot of happy schoolboys Arthur no doubt left behind, Luke said softly to Theodora, and Theodora said, but today is only Saturday. I do not mind this cooking at all, Mrs. Montague said. John, I will speak to your cook in the morning. Mrs. Dudley is an admirable woman, the doctor said carefully. Bit fancy for my taste, Arthur said. I'm a meat and potatoes man myself, he explained to Theodora. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't read trash. Bad example for the fellows at the school. They look up to one a bit, you know. I'm sure they must all model themselves on you, Theodora said soberly. Get a bad hat now and then, Arthur said, shaking his head. No taste for sports, you know. Moping in corners, crybabies. Knock that out of them fast enough. He reached for the butter. Mrs. Montague leaned forward to look down the table at Arthur. Eat lightly, Arthur, she advised. We have a busy night ahead of us. What on earth do you plan to do? The doctor asked. I'm sure that you would never dream of going about these things with any system, but you will have to admit, John, that in this area I have simply more of an instinctive understanding. Women do, you know, John, at least some women. She paused and regarded Eleanor and Theodora speculatively. Neither of them, I dare say. Unless, of course, I am mistaken again. You are very fond of pointing out my errors, John. My dear, I cannot abide a slipshod job in anything. Arthur will patrol, of course. I brought Arthur for that purpose. It is so rare, she explained to Luke, who sat on the other side, to find persons in the educational field who are interested in the other world. You will find Arthur surprisingly well informed. I will recline in your haunted room with only a nightlight burning, and will endeavor to get in touch with the elements disturbing this house. I never sleep when there are troubled spirits about, she told Luke, who nodded speechless. Little sound common sense, Arthur said. Got to go about these things in the right way. Never pays to aim too low. Tell my fellows that. I think perhaps after dinner we will have a little session with Planchette, Mrs. Montague said. Just Arthur and I, of course. The rest of you, I can see, are not ready yet. You would only drive away the spirits. We will need a quiet room. The library, Luke suggested politely. The library? I think it might do. Books are frequently very good carriers, you know. Materializations are often best produced in rooms where there are books. I cannot think of any time when materialization was in any way hampered by the presence of books. I suppose the library has been dusted. Arthur sometimes sneezes. Mrs. Dudley keeps the entire house in perfect order, the doctor said. I really will speak to Mrs. Dudley in the morning. You will show us the library then, John, and that young man will bring down my case. Not the large suitcase, mind, but the small attaché case. Bring it to me in the library. We will join you later. After a session with Planchette, I require a glass of milk and perhaps a small cake. Crackers will do if they are not too heavily salted. A few minutes of quiet conversation with congenial people is also very helpful, particularly if I am to be receptive during the night. The mind is a precise instrument and cannot be tended too carefully. Arthur, she bowed distantly to Eleanor and Theodora and went out, escorted by Arthur, Luke, and her husband. After a minute, Theodora said, I think I'm going to be simply crazy about Mrs. Montague. I don't know, Eleanor said. Arthur is rather more to my taste, and Luke is a coward, I think. Poor Luke, Theodora said. He never had a mother. Looking up, Eleanor found that Theodora was regarding her with a curious smile, and she moved away from the table so quickly that a glass spilled. We shouldn't be alone, she said, oddly breathless. We've got to find the others. She left the table and almost ran from the room, and Theodora ran after her, laughing, down the corridor and into the little parlor where Luke and the doctor stood before the fire. Please, sir, Luke was saying meekly, who is Planchette? The doctor sighed irritably. Imbeciles, he said, and then, sorry, the whole idea annoys me, but if she likes it. He turned and poked the fire furiously. Planchette, he went on after a minute, is a device similar to the Ouija board. Or perhaps I might explain better by saying that it is a form of automatic writing, a method of communication with intangible beings. Although, to my way of thinking, the only intangible beings who ever got in touch through one of those things are the imaginations of the people running it. Yes. Well, Planchette is a little piece of light wood, usually heart-shaped or triangular. A pencil is set into the narrow end, and at the other end is a pair of wheels, or feet, which will slip easily over paper. Two people place fingers on it, ask it questions, and the object moves, pushed by what force we will not here discuss, and writes answers. The Ouija board, as I say, is very similar, except that the object moves on a board pointing to separate letters. An ordinary wine glass will do the same thing. I have seen it tried with a child's wheeled toy, although I will admit that it looked silly. Each person uses the tips of the fingers of one hand, keeping the other hand free to note down questions and answers. The answers are invariably, I believe, meaningless, although, of course, my wife will tell you different. Balderdash. And he winked at the fire again. Schoolgirls, he said. Superstition. Wow. That's my favorite character so far. Mrs. Montague. Even talking the way that I can imagine her talking. I didn't even do it properly. But good Lord, that's an obnoxious woman. What do you guys think of her? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she's not a nag. I almost started singing that. Okay. Well, my good sir, thank you for hanging out. If you've already bailed, I guess if you watch it on the replay, you'll see me say goodbye. But if you're still here, no worries. Thanks for watching, man. Write long, prestigious essays in the comments. I'll be waiting, sir. These are the vague recollections of a flighty twit. Absolutely riveting. Yeah, sure, Sam. I believe you. I don't hear a dry tone in that at all. I did give you the look at the beginning. I mean, come on. Just instantly, oh, now she's going for a walk. Seriously, what was that chapter? Chapter 1 was just, oh, she's personifying grass. Like, she's something else. She's something else. She went for a walk, guys. That was that chapter. And the grass thinks that mobile creatures are silly and unfortunate or whatever. There's the chapter. The hills are alive. Yeah, it was a great chapter, wasn't it? Think of Memento. Okay. Am I part of this conversation? That's Victorian writing, like all the Pride and Prejudice era stories. You know, indecent stuff is going on, but that wasn't talked or written about. I really, really, really dislike Pride and Prejudice. I think it's overrated as hell. Memento, Fight Club, One Flew Over. It's not supposed to make sense. Yeah. Oh my Lord. When I heard that they're making an like all female Fight Club, I just seriously, what are you thinking? the memes, the jokes, everything that is going to come out of this. Like, thank you, because it's going to be hilarious. Is it going to be a good movie? No, the fuck it's not. Oi. They should be. It should be trans women. They probably will have a few in there, I'm sure. You know that shit ain't gonna be good. This is the literary equivalent of a Meg Ryan chick flick. It's not for dudes or people with taste of any kind. That's a little harsh on Meg Ryan. Just saying. Rude. Greta Gerwig. Oh, of course she is. Charlize. I would never. 50 Shades or Twitlight. At first, I just thought you typoed it, and then I reread what you put. I don't think it was a typo, was it? Was it, Andy? No wonder the doctor went away by himself to a haunted house. His wife is a piece of work, right? Like, I would run as fast as I can without looking back to a haunted house rather than stay home with that. Fun little fact. I don't like Monty Python, so I can't really do that. It's hysterical that a character in this book said, don't read I know! Oh my god. When I read that, ugh! This book is driving me crazy. Driving me crazy! But isn't it an archaeologist's job to read the trash left over discovered in their digs? Yeah, it is. I'm not an archaeologist. Why am I reading this? The doc's wife, I've gotten this far. I have to finish it, but Doc's wife comes in for like 5 minutes and thinks that she runs the place. Yeah, nag. She's a friggin' nag. You say she's obnoxious. I've been thinking insufferable is definitely a good descriptor for this woman. Well, enjoy your Australian day while I go to sleep later. Female Fight Club. Yeah, the Paris Olympics. Nice. Mrs. Montague enters the scene. The doc says, it's a witch. We should burn her because she looks and acts like one. Yeah, in a Monty Python voice. Insert in all of y'all's brains that have an inner monologue the sound of a Monty Python voice. There you go. Should I? It's a witch. We should burn her because she looks and acts like one. So there. Imagine your Monty Python voice there. Is it just British? Is that what Monty Python voice is? Because I could do that when I was drunk in the Philippines, but sober, I'd probably butcher it even more. Half the point of Fight Club is that it covered the dissolution of men in society. It was about men feeling they had no role in life. How the fuck can they remake it with women? Well, if it's men pretending to be women, somehow it would apply, maybe. Slightly, yes. Yes, she does. To me, at least. She's obnoxious. You want food? I'll be right back, guys. I don't understand what weighing the same as a duck means. I'm lost. Is this a Monty Python reference? It's kind of a long chapter for a chapter 2 in this book. For all of these parts. It's interesting. God, this book does not make any freaking sense. Yes, time to feed the hungry feline before he whines a lot because he doesn't attack me. Stupid thing. Sorry. I was going to say, did Sam somehow leave his own flesh to control your keyboard? I do know that reference, Legatus, the Knights of Ni. Yeah, that's what I thought you were quoting, the Holy Grail. I missed several of these streams, and I feel like I haven't missed any of this book. It's that bad. You know what? You're correct. The women are catty. The men don't really do anything. And then they get really off topic in between chapters, and there's no cohesive story in it. Not really. If you consider a cohesive story, characters and character growth and just point A to point B, because none of that is here. I think I know where they're going with this book. Not sure I'm going to like that. I don't know if I'm going to like it either. I have my suspicions. That's true. I think it's been 2 chapters since we heard it? Let's see if we'll go 3 chapters without it, shall we? That's not the right button. Here's the right button. Part 7, Chapter 3. Planchette has been very kind tonight, Mrs. Montague said. John, there are definitely foreign elements present in the house. Quite a splendid sitting, really, Arthur said. He waved a sheaf of paper triumphantly. We've gotten a good deal of information for you, Mrs. Montague said. Now, Planchette was quite insistent about a nun. Have you learned anything about a nun, John? In Hill House? Not likely. Planchette felt very strongly about a nun, John. Perhaps something of the sort, a dark, vague figure even, has been seen in the neighborhood. Villagers terrified when staggering home late at night. The figure of a nun is a fairly common... John, if you please. I assume you are suggesting that I am mistaken, or perhaps it is your intention to point out that Planchette may be mistaken. I assure you, and you must believe Planchette, even if my word is not good enough for you, that a nun was most specifically suggested. I am only trying to say, my dear, that the wraith of a nun is far and away the most common form of appearance. There has never been such a thing connected with Hill House, but in almost every... John, if you please, I assume I may continue? Or is Planchette to be dismissed without a hearing? Thank you. Mrs. Montague composed herself. Now then, there is also a name spelled variously as Helen or Helene or Elena. Who might that be? My dear, many people have lived. Helen brought us a warning against a mysterious monk. Now, when a monk and a nun both turn up in one house, expect the place was built on an older site, Arthur said. Influences prevailing, you know, older influences hanging around. He explained more fully. It sounds very much like broken vows, does it not? Very much. Had a lot of that back then, you know. Temptation, probably. I hardly think, the doctor began. I dare say she was walled up alive, Mrs. Montague said. The nun, I mean. They always did that, you know. You've no idea the messages I've gotten from nuns walled up alive. There is no case on record of any nun ever being... John, may I point out to you once more that I myself have had messages from nuns walled up alive? Do you think I am telling you a fib, John? Or do you suppose that a nun would deliberately pretend to have been walled up alive when she was not? Is it possible that I am mistaken once more, John? Certainly not, my dear, Dr. Montague sighed wearily. With one candle and a crust of bread, Arthur told Theodora. Horrible thing to do when you think about it. No nun was ever walled up alive, the doctor said sullenly. He raised his voice slightly. It is a legend, a story, a libel circulated. All right, John, we won't quarrel over it. You may believe whatever you choose. Just understand, however, that sometimes purely materialistic views must give way before facts. Now, it is a proven fact that among the visitations troubling this house are a nun and a... What else was there? Luke asked hastily. I am so interested in hearing what Planchette had to say. Mrs. Montague waggled a finger roguishly. Nothing about you, young man, although one of the ladies present may hear something of interest. Impossible woman, Eleanor thought. Impossible, vulgar, possessive woman. Now, Helen, Mrs. Montague went on, wants us to search the cellar for an old well. Don't tell me Helen was buried alive, the doctor said. I hardly think so, John. I am sure that she would have mentioned it. As a matter of fact, Helen was most unclear about just what we were to find in the well. I doubt, however, that it will be treasure. One so rarely meets with real treasure in a case of this kind. More likely evidence of the missing nun. More likely 80 years of rubbish. John, I cannot understand this skepticism in you. Of all people. After all, you did come to this house to collect evidence of supernatural activity, and now, when I bring you a full account of the causes and an indication of where to start looking, you are positively scornful. We have no authority to dig up the cellar. Arthur could... Mrs. Montague began hopefully, but the doctor said with firmness, no. My lease of the house specifically forbids me to tamper with the house itself. There will be no digging of cellars, no tearing out of woodwork, no ripping up of floors. Hill House is still a valuable property, and we are students, not vandals. I should think you'd want to know the truth, John. There is nothing I should like to know more. Dr. Montague stamped across the room to the chessboard and took up a knight and regarded it furiously. He looked as though he were doggedly counting to 100. Dear me, how patient one must be sometimes, Mrs. Montague sighed. But I do want to read you the little passage we received toward the end. Arthur, do you have it? Arthur shuffled through his sheaf of papers. It was just after the message about the flowers you were to send to your aunt, Mrs. Montague said. Planchette has a control named Marigot, she explained, and Marigot takes a genuine personal interest in Arthur, brings him word from relatives, and so on. Not a fatal illness, you understand, Arthur said gravely. Have to send flowers, of course, but Marigot is most reassuring. Now, Mrs. Montague selected several pages and turned them over quickly. They were covered with loose, sprawling, penciled words, and Mrs. Montague frowned, running down the pages with her finger. Here, she said, Arthur, you read the questions and I'll read the answers. That way, it will sound more natural. Off we go, Arthur said brightly, and leaned over Mrs. Montague's shoulder. Now, let me see. Start right about here. With, who are you? Righto. Who are you? Nell, Mrs. Montague read in her sharp voice, and Eleanor and Theodora and Luke and the doctor turned, listening. Nell who? Eleanor, Nellie, Nell, Nell. They sometimes do that, Mrs. Montague broke off to explain. They repeat a word over and over to make sure it comes across all right. Arthur cleared his throat. What do you want? He read. Home. Do you want to go home? And Theodora shrugged comically at Eleanor. Want to be home. What are you doing here? Waiting. Waiting for what? Home. Arthur stopped and nodded profoundly. There it is again, he said, like a word, and use it over and over, just for the sound of it. Ordinarily, we never ask why, Mrs. Montague said, because it tends to confuse Planchette. However, this time we were bold and came right out and asked, Arthur? Why? Arthur read. Mother, Mrs. Montague read. So you see, this time we were right to ask, because Planchette was perfectly free with the answer. Is Hill House your home? Arthur read levelly. Home, Mrs. Montague responded, and the doctor sighed. Are you suffering? Arthur read. No answer here, Mrs. Montague nodded reassuringly. Sometimes they dislike admitting to pain. It tends to discourage those of us left behind, you know. Just like Arthur's aunt, for instance, will never let on that she is sick, but Marigot always lets us know, and it's even worse when they've passed over. Stoical, Arthur confirmed, and read, Can we help you? No, Mrs. Montague read. Can we do anything at all for you? No. Lost, lost, lost. Mrs. Montague looked up. You see, she asked. One word over and over again. They love to repeat themselves. I've had one word go on to cover a whole page sometimes. What do you want? Arthur read. Mother, Mrs. Montague read back. Why? Child. Where is your mother? Home. Where is your home? Lost, lost, lost. And after that, Mrs. Montague said, folding the paper briskly, there was nothing but gibberish. Never known planchette so cooperative, Arthur said confidingly to Theodora. Quite an experience, really. But why pick on Nell? Theodora asked with annoyance. Your fool planchette has no right to send messages to people without permission, or you'll never get results by abusing planchette, Arthur began. But Mrs. Montague interrupted him, swinging to stare at Eleanor. You're Nell, she demanded, and turned on Theodora. We thought you were Nell, she said. So, said Theodora impudently. It doesn't affect the messages, of course, Mrs. Montague said, tapping her paper irritably, although I do think we might have been correctly introduced. I am sure that Planchette knew the difference between you, but I certainly do not care to be misled. Don't feel neglected, Luke said to Theodora. We will bury you alive. When I get a message from that thing, Theodora said, I expect it to be about hidden treasure. None of this nonsense about sending flowers to my aunt. They are all carefully avoiding looking at me, Eleanor thought. I have been singled out again, and they are kind enough to pretend it is nothing. Why do you think all that was sent to me? She asked, helpless. Really, child, Mrs. Montague said, dropping the papers on the low table. I couldn't begin to say. Although you are rather more than a child, aren't you? Perhaps you are more receptive psychically than you realize, although, and she turned away indifferently, how you could be a week in this house and not picking up the simplest message from beyond. That fire wants stirring. Nell doesn't want messages from beyond, Theodora said comfortingly, moving to take Eleanor's cold hand in hers. Nell wants her warm bed and a little sleep. Peace, Eleanor thought concretely. What I want in all this world is peace. A quiet spot to lie and think. A quiet spot up among the flowers where I can dream and tell myself sweet stories. Okay, so I guess Planchette isn't as nonsensical as it seems. We'll see. Maybe all of this is in her head, which I hate this. Yeah, it's written for a modern audience. Absolutely correct. There has been no point so far. I feel like it's going to be all completely dismantled at the end, so it really is a Disney Plus MCU show. Wicked, wicked Zoot. Oh, she's a naughty person and she must pay the penalty. Ay, ay. I'm assuming this is Monty Python stuff still. Yep, I'm pretty sure. Okay, this time I'm really belly. Have a good day, Mud Crab. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, imagine me how I feel reading it. Mrs. Montague is a pain in the ass. People like this irritate me. A planchette is an inanimate tool, inert save for the will of the wielder, like a pencil. It doesn't know a goddamn thing. Isn't that the same as a friggin' Ouija board? I didn't mean that to sound as derisive as it came out. I just don't put much stock in things like that. And it was all a dream. Yeah. It was a dream, or she's in a nutter house, or it's what it's seemingly, I feel, is how it's going to end, at least. Like, that was a decent chapter. I would be interested more if there were chapters like this more frequently in this book, like this, like the 4 chapters ago now, 3. It's dumb. It's driving me crazy. Like, you give me a good chapter and then like 20 chapters of nonsense, and it does not make a good book. Freaking terrible. How do you have a big scene with Eleanor and Theodora seeing stuff outside and being scared, and we get nothing going forward from it? Exactly. Like, this has been 3 chapters of nonsense. And the tonal shift between that and then Mrs. freaking Montague showing up, are you freaking kidding me? It's like a melodrama. Ugh, run wild. It's fine, Ouija are retarded too. Thanks, Sam. God. I can't believe how ridiculous this is. So 2 total chapters have come through where I had a level of interest that was peaked, and then it just completely, this is how frustrated I get, apparently. I can't jar the table desk thing. My bad. Your car pulls up to the gates and the driver yells at the sleeping passenger, "Hey, we are here." And it is Eleanor getting out of the car, something like that. You know, I just thought of something that was given away in the introduction that has not happened yet. This terrible book started with the terrible introduction that gave away more than half of the book. Oh my God. I swear to God, if it ends that way, I'm going to be furious. I'm not going to remind you guys, and if you feel like going back and possibly spoiling it for yourselves, feel free to the first friggin' reading of this when I did the intro, if you can slog your way through the intro, because I only read half of it and it was terrible. Oh my God. That's going to really annoy me if that's how it ends up. Oh, I'm going to be mad. Gonna be mad. Moving on. Part 7, Chapter 4. I, Arthur said richly, shall make my headquarters in a small room just this side of the nursery, well within shouting distance. I shall have with me a drawn revolver. Do not take alarm, ladies. I am an excellent shot. And a flashlight, in addition to a most piercing whistle. I shall have no difficulty summoning the rest of you in case I observe anything worth your notice, or I require company. You may all sleep quietly, I assure you. Arthur, Mrs. Montague explained, will patrol the house. Every hour regularly, he will make a round of the upstairs rooms. I think he need hardly bother with the downstairs rooms tonight, since I shall be up there. We have done this before many times. Come along, everyone. Silently, they followed her up the staircase, watching her little affectionate dabs at the stair rail and the carvings on the walls. It is such a blessing, she said once, to know that the beings in this house are only waiting for an opportunity to tell their stories and free themselves from the burden of their sorrow. Now, Arthur will first of all inspect the bedrooms. Arthur. With apologies, ladies, with apologies, Arthur said, opening the door of the blue room, which Eleanor and Theodora shared. A dainty spot, he said plummily. Fit for 2 such charming ladies. I shall, if you like, save you the trouble of glancing into the closet and under the bed. Solemnly, they watched Arthur go down onto his hands and knees and look under the beds and then rise, dusting his hands. Perfectly safe, he said. Now, where am I to be? Mrs. Montague asked. Where did that young man put my bags? Directly at the end of the hall, the doctor said. We call it the nursery. Mrs. Montague, followed by Arthur, moved purposefully down the hall, past the cold spot in the hall, and shivered. I will certainly need extra blankets, she said. Have that young man bring extra blankets from one of the other rooms. Opening the nursery door, she nodded and said, The bed looks quite fresh, I must admit, but has the room been aired? I told Mrs. Dudley, the doctor said. It smells musty. Arthur, you will have to open that window in spite of the cold. Drearily, the animals on the nursery wall looked down on Mrs. Montague. Are you sure The doctor hesitated and glanced up apprehensively at the grinning faces over the nursery door. I wonder if you ought to have someone in here with you, he said. My dear, Mrs. Montague, good-humored now in the presence of those who had passed beyond, was amused. How many hours, how many hours have I sat in purest love and understanding, alone in a room and yet never alone? My dear, how can I make you perceive that there is no danger where there is nothing but love and sympathetic understanding? I am here to help these unfortunate beings. I am here to extend the hand of heartfelt fondness and let them know that there are still some who remember, who will listen and weep for them. Their loneliness is over, and yes, the doctor said, but leave the door open. Unlocked, if you insist. Mrs. Montague was positively magnanimous. I shall be only down the hall, the doctor said. I can hardly offer to patrol, since that will be Mr. Arthur's occupation. But if you need anything, I can hear you. Mrs. Montague laughed and waved her hand at him. These others need your protection so much more than I, she said. I will do what I can, of course, but they are so very, very vulnerable, with their hard hearts and their unseeing eyes. Arthur, followed by Luke looking very much amused, returned from checking the other bedrooms on the floor and nodded briskly at the doctor. All clear, he said. Perfectly safe for you to go to bed now. Thank you, the doctor told him soberly, and then said to his wife, Good night. Be careful. Good night, Mrs. Montague said, and smiled around at all of them. Please don't be afraid, she said. No matter what happens, remember that I am here. Good night, Theodora said, and good night, said Luke. Good night, John boy. Oh, sorry, that was an ad-lib. And with Arthur behind them, assuring them that they might rest quietly and not to worry if they heard shots, and he would start his first patrol at midnight. Eleanor and Theodora went into their own room, and Luke on down the hall to his. After a moment, the doctor turning reluctantly away from his wife's closed door, followed. Wait, Theodora said to Eleanor once in their room. Luke said they want us down the hall. Don't get undressed and be quiet. She opened the door a crack and whispered over her shoulder, I swear that old Biddy's going to blow this house wide open with that perfect love business. If I ever saw a place that had no use for perfect love, it's Hill House. Now, Arthur's closed his door. Quick, be quiet. Silently, making no sound on the hall carpeting, they hurried in their stockinged feet down the hall to the doctor's room. Hurry, the doctor said, opening the door just wide enough for them to come in. Be quiet. It's not safe, Luke said, closing the door to a crack and coming down to sit on the floor. That man's going to shoot somebody. I don't like it, the doctor said, worried. Luke and I will stay up and watch, and I want you two ladies in here where we can keep an eye on you. Something's going to happen, he said. I don't like it. I just hope she didn't go and make anything mad with her planchette, Theodora said. Sorry, Dr. Montague. I don't intend to speak rudely of your wife. The doctor laughed, but stayed with his eye to the door. She originally planned to come for our entire stay, he said, but she had enrolled in a course in yoga and could not miss her meetings. She's an excellent woman in most respects, he added, looking earnestly around at them. She is a good wife and takes very good care of me. She does things splendidly, really. Buttons on my shirts, he smiled hopefully. This, and he gestured in the direction of the hall, this is practically her only vice. Perhaps she feels she's helping you with your work, Eleanor said. The doctor grimaced and shivered. At that moment, the door swung wide and then crashed shut, and in the silence outside, they could hear slow rushing movements as though a very steady, very strong wind were blowing the length of the hall. Glancing at one another, they tried to smile, tried to look courageous under the slow coming of the unreal cold, and then, through the noise of a wind, the knocking on the doors downstairs. Without a word, Theodora took up from the quilt from the foot of the doctor's bed and folded it around Eleanor and herself, and they moved close together, slowly in order not to make a sound. Eleanor, clinging to Theodora, deadly cold in spite of Theodora's arms around her, thought, It knows my name. It knows my name this time. The pounding came up the stairs, crashing on each step. The doctor was tense, standing by the door, and Luke moved over to stand beside him. It's nowhere near the nursery, he said to the doctor, and put his hand out to stop the doctor from opening the door. How weary one gets of this constant pounding, Theodora said ridiculously. Next summer, I must really go somewhere else. There are disadvantages everywhere, Luke told her. In the lake regions, you get mosquitoes. Could we have exhausted the repertoire of Hill House? Theodora asked, her voice shaking in spite of her light tone. Seems like we've had this pounding act before. Is it going to start everything all over again? The crashing echoed along the hall, seeming to come from the far end, the farthest from the nursery, and the doctor, tense against the door, shook his head anxiously. I'm going to have to go out there, he said. She might be frightened, he told them. Eleanor, rocking to the pounding, which seemed inside her head as much as in the hall, holding tight to Theodora, said, They know where we are. And the others, assuming that she meant Arthur and Mrs. Montague, nodded and listened. The knocking, Eleanor told herself, pressing her hands to her eyes and swaying with the noise, will go on down the hall. It will go on to the end of the hall and turn and come back again. It will just go on the way it did before, and then it will stop, and we will look at each other and laugh and try to remember how cold we were, and the little swimming curls of fear on our backs. After a while, it will stop. It never hurt us, Theodora was telling the doctor across the noise of the pounding. It won't hurt them. I only hope she doesn't try to do anything about it, the doctor said grimly. He was still at the door, but seemingly unable to open it against the volume of noise outside. I feel positively like an old hand at this, Theodora said to Eleanor. Come closer, Nell. Keep warm. And she pulled Eleanor even nearer to her under the blanket, and the sickening still cold surrounded them. Then there came, suddenly, quiet. In the secret, creeping silence they all remembered. Holding their breaths, they looked at one another. The doctor held the doorknob with both hands, and Luke, although his face was white and his voice trembled, said lightly, Brandy, anyone? My passion for spirits. No, Theodora giggled wildly. Not that pun, she said. Sorry, you won't believe me, Luke said, the brandy decanter rattling against the glass as he tried to pour. But I no longer think of it as a pun. That is what living in a haunted house does for a sense of humor. Using both hands to carry the glass, he came to the bed where Theodora and Eleanor huddled under the blanket, and Theodora brought out one hand and took the glass. Here, she said, holding it to Eleanor's mouth. Drink. Sipping, not warmed, Eleanor thought, we are in the eye of the storm. There is not much more time. She watched Luke carefully carry a glass of brandy over to the doctor and hold it out, and then, without comprehending, watched the glass slip through Luke's fingers to the floor as the door was shaken, violently and silently. Luke pulled the doctor back, and the door was attacked without sound, seeming almost to be pulling away from its hinges, almost ready to buckle and go down, leaving them exposed. Backing away, Luke and the doctor waited, tense and helpless. It can't get in, Theodora was whispering over and over, her eyes on the door. It can't get in. Don't let it get in. It can't get in. The shaking stopped. The door was quiet, and a little caressing touch began on the doorknob, feeling intimately and softly, and then, because the door was locked, patting and fondling the doorframe, as though wheedling to be let in. It knows we're here, Eleanor whispered, and Luke, looking back at her over his shoulder, gestured furiously for her to be quiet. It is so cold, Eleanor thought childishly. I will never be able to sleep again with all this noise coming from inside my head. How can these others hear the noise when it is coming from inside my head? I am disappearing inch by inch into the house. I am going apart a little bit at a time because all this noise is breaking me. Why are the others frightened? She was aware, dully, that the pounding had begun again. The metallic, overwhelming sound of it washed over her like waves. She put her cold hands to her mouth to feel if her face was still there. I have had enough, she thought. I am too cold. At the nursery door, Luke said tensely, speaking clearly through the noise. At the nursery door, don't. And he put a hand to stop the doctor. Purest love, Theodora said madly, purest love. And she began to giggle again. If they don't open the doors, Luke said to the doctor. The doctor stood now with his head against the door, listening, while Luke holding his arm to keep him from moving. Now we are going to have a new noise, Eleanor thought, listening to the inside of her head. It is changing. The pounding had stopped, as though it had proved ineffectual, and there was now a swift movement up and down the hall, as if an animal pacing back and forth with unbelievable impatience, watching first one door and then another, alert for a movement inside. And there was again the little babbling murmur which Eleanor remembered. Am I doing it? She wondered quickly. Is that me? And heard the tiny laughter beyond the door, mocking her. Fee, fi, fo, fum, Theodora said under her breath, and the laughter swelled and became a shouting. It's inside my head, Eleanor thought, putting her hands over her face. It's inside my head, and it's getting out, getting out, getting out. Now the house shivered and shook, the curtains dashing against the windows, the furniture swaying, and the noise in the hall became so great that it pushed against the walls. They could hear breaking glass as the pictures in the hall came down, and perhaps the smashing of windows. Luke and the doctor strained against the door, as though desperately holding it shut, and the floor moved under their feet. We're going, Eleanor thought, and heard Theodora say far away, the house is coming down. She sounded calm and beyond fear. Holding to the bed, buffeted and shaken, Eleanor put her head down and closed her eyes and bit her lips against the cold and felt the sickening drop as the room fell away beneath her and then right itself and then turned, slowly swinging. God Almighty, Theodora said, and a mile away at the door, Luke caught the doctor and held him upright. Are you all right? Luke called, back braced against the door, holding the doctor by the shoulders. Theo, are you all right? Hanging on, Theodora said. I don't know about Nell. Keep her warm, Luke said far away. We haven't seen it all yet. His voice trailed away. Eleanor could hear and see him far away in the distant room where he and Theodora and the doctor still waited. In the churning darkness where she felt endlessly nothing was real except her own hands white around the bedpost. She could see them, very small, and see them tighten when the bed rocked and the wall leaned forward and the door turned sideways far away. Somewhere there was a great shaking crash as some huge thing came headlong. It must be the tower, Eleanor thought, and I supposed it would stand for years. We are lost. The house is destroying itself. She heard the laughter overall, coming thin and lunatic, rising in its little crazy tune, and thought, no, it is over for me. It is too much, she thought. I will relinquish my possession of this self of mine, abdicate, give over willingly what I never wanted at all. Whatever it wants of me, it can have. I'll come, she said aloud, and was speaking up to Theodora, who leaned over her. The room was perfectly quiet, and between the still curtains at the window, she could see the sunlight. Luke sat in a chair by the window. His face was bruised, and his shirt was torn, and he was still drinking brandy. The doctor sat back in another chair, his hair freshly combed, looking neat and dapper and self-possessed. Theodora, leaning over Eleanor, said, She's all right, I think. And Eleanor sat up and shook her head, staring. Composed and quiet, the house lifted itself primly around her, and nothing had been moved. How? Eleanor said, and all three of them laughed. Another day, the doctor said, and in spite of his appearance, the voice was wan. Another night, he said. As I tried to say earlier, Luke remarked, living in a haunted house plays hell with a sense of humor. I really did not intend to make a forbidden pun, he told Theodora. How are they? Eleanor asked, the words sounding unfamiliar and her mouth stiff. Both sleeping like babies, the doctor said. Actually, he said, as though continuing a conversation begun while Eleanor slept, I cannot believe that my wife stirred up that storm. But I do admit that one more word about pure love. What happened? Eleanor asked. I must have been gritting my teeth all night, she thought, the way my mouth feels. Hill House went dancing, Theodora said, taking us along on a mad midnight fling. At least I think it was dancing. It might have been turning somersaults. It's almost 9, the doctor said. When Eleanor is ready. Come along, baby, Theodora said. Theo will wash your face for you and make you all meet for breakfast. The more and more this continues, it becomes a psychological BS story. And I don't like it. I want horror, not a crazy person's brain. Maybe I'll go watch John Wick. Thank you, Blue-Eyed Scorpio. I don't know. You don't have to. It seems like a torture. So they put her in the room with the creepy 2 heads. Yes, Dom, they did. they brought a gun to a ghost fight and nothing could go wrong, right? And going back, we got confirmation for how long the doc has been there because I think we were confused. The doc's wife said he was there for a week now. See, that was interesting, and then it died off because what was in her head, what was not in her head, like, did it end? I don't... One more stream left. And then I can throw the book elsewhere. My tea is cold. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you. That was the end of part 7, so doing part 8 and part 9 next week. I feel like it lasted a week too, the chapter. And yes, Dom, I completely agree. It is a very weird book. Maybe it's a product of its time, but I don't know. I feel like there's better books out there. I guess it's a product of its time when women are allowed to do things. And I think Sam said, like, in the first or second stream I did with this, that God, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, that like the show was touted as some feminist book come to life type of thing. So it became popular, and that's why Devil had it on his mind, because there was the Netflix show, and that's why it kind of won the poll. No worries. I don't think you're hounding us. Me, whichever you were referring. I'll probably give the show a go. Have you finished it? Like, I thought you said you were rewatching it, Blue-Eyed Scorpio, but I could be wrong in that. Again, my memory in real time. I see. It was the first stream. Thanks, Sam. You voted for the book because you know they were totally different. I mean, that makes sense. Especially, like, if anyone else who's seen the show, if they voted in it, they probably did the same thing. And likely because they hadn't read the book. And this is part of Guillermo del Toro's, like, what do they call it? The Penguin Horror. Okay, Penguin Horror is a collection of novels, stories, and poems by masters of the genre, curated by filmmaker and lifelong horror literature reader Guillermo del Toro. Included in the series are some of his favorites: Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, The Raven, Tales and Poems by Edgar Allan Poe, The Thing on the Doorstep, and Other Weird Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. Sam will appreciate that. Haunting of Hill House, Haunted Castles, The Complete Gothic Stories by Ray Russell, and American Supernatural Tales, edited by S.T. Joshi, and featuring stories from Ray Bradbury, Joyce Carol Oates, Robert E. Howard, and Stephen King, alongside many others. Penguin Horror reminds us what Del Toro writes in his series introduction. To learn what we fear is to learn who we are. And that's why, like, this is the special cover for the Penguin Horror ones. I actually have Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. So this is a fun cover. Here's the back. And the pages are all blackened on the edges. It's pretty cool. You can kind of see, like, how they're faded. I like it. But I got that in preparation for the next time I read a horror genre. Horror. Because I'm not going to do a poll for it. phrasing. I decided that I will give in to Sam's demands. You're watching it for the third time right now. Watched a video about little Easter eggs. Now noticing them. Nice. Watched one episode on little things so the meaning something later are very interesting. The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer is basically the same story as The Haunting of Hill House, Sam. So it's like the better version of this, depending on how this ends. Yeah, the black edge is pretty cool, huh? When this book is over, we can think of it nevermore. I like it. I like where your head's at, your average patriot nerd. I have that somewhere. I swear I do. It's not this cover, but I know I do somewhere. Whatever. But anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. Hopefully Static's pregame is still going on, and I'm going to jump on over there, maybe for the last 15 minutes of it or so. So Static 2020, if y'all want to follow over there, you can. If he sent me the link. He did. Hey, look at that. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to make it because I knew this would be a long one. Thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate you guys. I know I'm not enthused with this story, and most of you probably are not as well, but I appreciate you guys watching it, whether it's after, during, you know the thing. But yeah, so Static 2020, go hop over there. I'm going to jump on here soon. I'm going to make some more tea real quick, but otherwise follow me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Rumble. You know the drill. Like, subscribe. Appreciate you guys. Have a good night, and I will see you hopefully in a few minutes if you come by.